This episode of Future Construct is supported by Applied Software. We would like to thank them so much for supporting us. Applied Software is really on a mission to transform industries. They empower their clients and champion innovation with real-world expert consultants. So to reach them, you go to asti.com, that's ASTI.com, and please tell them that we at Future Construct and BIM Designs sent you. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Future Construct. I'm Amy Peck, your host, and I am so excited for our guest today, Amy Marks, who is the head of Industrialized Construction Strategy and Evangelism globally at Autodesk. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
So the other moniker that you are known by is, of course, the Queen of Prefab. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got that name?
You know, it's so funny. And actually, we talked about it a little on the Construction Channel mini series that, I think originally I was walking out on stage in Asia, and I don't know, it was probably like 1,000 people, 99.99% of them were men. And then they have a speaker and I come out and I'm always in high heels and a dress. And I think the announcer just said, and she's the Queen of Prefab. And this was like years ago. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And my friends thought it was really funny in the beginning. And I was like, no, I was listening, like maybe Prefab Barbie is already taken, but I'll go with Queen of Prefab for now. That's good. I'll go with it.
I like that. No, I think Queen is definitely better than Barbie. Queen has that gravitas. You've got that power. You have a kingdom. I like Queen. I like, you have a queendom, actually.
I'll take it. Somebody recently actually said to me, they're like, if you're the queen, who's the king? And I was like, why do I need a king?
I've got this. Yeah. I got prefab under control.
Exactly.
I love it. So how does this fit into your role at Autodesk? Can you tell us a little bit about, what's in your purview and your day-to-day?
Sure. So I came from industry, but I've been at Autodesk now almost a year. And it's my role to actually inform all of product strategy at Autodesk in terms of industrialized construction and what the future looks like when it comes to convergence clients and the platform at Autodesk to support that. And then as well, I work with all customers at Autodesk and people outside of that base to help them on the journey for industrialized construction in order to, be more efficient and optimize what they're doing.
That's great. And so with this kind of evolution of technology, and there's so much of it kind of rushing towards us, what are some of the things that, and Autodesk has so many great tools, but what are some of the ways that, companies can really leverage technology today, whether it be smart glasses, whether it be VR, whether it be, blockchain, AI? What are you seeing?
It's funny, there's a lot of great tech out there. And maybe I'll start with a quick story that a friend of mine was talking about. For 3 years, they were trying to go paperless in a particular area in their company, and they couldn't. And then COVID hit, and in 3 days, he's like, how are we now paperless in 3 days? So there's a lot of great technology out there. Autodesk, we have tremendous software out in design and construction and manufacturing and operations and media and entertainment. I think one of the things I always tell people is there's great tech out there. New tech is coming all the time, but it's the way in which we behave with tech and we utilize tech to its fullest, and that some of the constructs in our business models and our ecosystem that stop us from using tech, those are the things, those constraints we need to remove out of our way. There's no lack of great tech, right? It's our behavior that stops us from using it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that you bring up a really interesting point, is that I think we've discovered that we can, even at large companies can move a lot faster than they imagine. And we were sort of forced into that. And so one of the things that comes up quite a bit is sort of this idea of, having a 3D asset library that kind of maybe begins with VR and visualization and maybe kind of moves through the building life cycle, then becomes maybe an AR layer. Where do you see as a good way for companies to start with that journey?
It's so funny. I think for me, what you just said, it starts with productization. At the end of the day, it's very hard to understand data when you're looking at things that are different every single time. There's no consistency in it, right? It's like, and in construction, for some reason and design, we've decided that everything is like designing a snowflake, operating a snowflake, and building a snowflake every single time. I don't know why, and we have examples of where it's not like that, right? So it's like, I always use the example of generators, and they come in a certain horsepower capacity, like at 200 or 250 horsepower or three. We somehow understand that product, we have to design around its capacity, but then everything else is up for grabs. It's like total means and methods. Yes, and by the way, you need that data, but you need that product data to be discrete data where it's not just a pretty picture of that element, but that it's actually functional data that allows me to understand how the bill of materials works, the bill of process, a direct connection to that supply chain partner, so that the data actually reflects how it's going to be manufactured and assembled. If it doesn't, and it's just a pretty picture representation of that, it's not that functional for us, right? So I think a lot of things that we're talking about in the world today, whether it's digital twin or generative design, those are generated, really the results of those things, the benefits of those can really be driven by industrialized construction and prefabrication. And we sort of sometimes forget that, you know what I mean? It's like, do you want to track process with millions of pieces and parts that are coming together differently every time? Or would you rather, productize certain elements within these spaces that you can reuse and understand and get better at it, right? It's like, we can never get good at this because we're just doing it for the first time every time.
I love that you brought that up, because we had a client in Southern Australia, one of the largest residential builders there. And they kind of quickly came to the conclusion that, instead of having this sort of infinite number of designs, which actually stalls the sales process, right?
Right.
So you have too much choice, that they just wanted to distill it down to 4 kind of basic designs. And then the layers of creativity came in, then you could maybe choose it from 10 different backsplashes, or,
Right.
They're thinking about the sale at the end and what's best for the consumer, not just the process. So I'd love to hear your perspective on, really building for the end user.
At the end of here's the problem, right? So very little of what we're doing is even focused on the end user, right? So when I said, like, we have to think about how the constructs are stopping us from adding value, right? It's like, think about this. We're a very siloed ecosystem, and we are one of the least digitized ecosystems on the planet. We are one of the least productive. We are not seeing technology being able to, like, more so in the construction than anywhere else, right? And the issue is, it's not that we're not smart. Like, I feel like when I tell people that, like, we're not doing this and we're not productive, they're like, well, we're not dumb, we're trying. I was like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm actually saying, like, listen, this is cash for chaos, right? This started as very siloed industries where people actually made money, not on purpose, but they have set up their business models because they make money on the misinformation or lack of information between these silos. So what does that mean? That means they draw things that will never be built and they get paid for that. They price things that will never get built and they get paid for that. They go out for multiple people who will never get the job, and that's part of this waste. And then we end up with materials, 40% of which are in our landfills, that came out of the construction process that were never going to end up in these buildings, but they were going to end up in the landfills, right? This doesn't make sense. But the problem is, we keep everything we have in our ecosystem is set up to replicate the value within these silos, but not across these silos. So it's not like somebody doesn't understand that. But okay, so now I'm an engineer, let's say, that draws things that I know never get built. Do I give that up, or do I keep my job and keep drawing things that probably most of which are never actually fabricated? But then I get paid again to, like, reconcile those drawings from somebody else that's going to build it, that's in a different silo. And then they kick those drawings back to me. And then I get paid to actually, like, kind of fit it into what my original intention. Why do we do that? It's not because we're not smart. It's because that silo has been set up to get paid like that, and the contracts mimic that, and the risk management mimics that, and everything mimics that cash for chaos silo. So how do you burn down those silos? And I just wrote a paper called Creative Destruction, breaking down silos for the new possible. The problem is, you need to burn it to the ground in order to, like, create new value, and that's a scary, risky thing for some people to feel.
I would like to thank the team at Applied Software for supporting this episode of the Future Construct podcast. With solutions for really any modern project, Applied Software is on a mission to transform industries by empowering their clients and being the champions of innovation with real-world expert consultants. They have a comprehensive array of solutions for AEC, MEP, and manufacturing with a singular focus, helping you achieve higher performance. So with software, training, support, consulting, and custom development, Applied Software has you covered for all of your workflow needs. And BIM Designs is proud to be a client and partner of Applied Software. So you can reach them at asti.com, it's ASTI.com, and please let them know that we here at Future Construct and BIM Designs sent you. And risky in the fact that this is it's one of the most capital intensive, businesses and verticals on the planet. And there's so much money at stake that doing anything that could potentially, halt workflows or just, time, money, you're right. I mean, how do we get those in power to say, all right, we're going to take a risk on this one and we're going to do it differently? Because as you pointed out, there's got to be a huge savings in bringing down these walls, allowing each of these factions to work with each other on a more holistic way. How are we going to convince people to do this?
Well, I think, what's happening now. So part of that paper was the fact that I'm writing this book called The Innovator's Deception. So Clayton Christensen was my professor at HBS when I got to spend some time there. And he wrote about the innovator's dilemma, right? So he talked about anytime you hear that word disruption or disruptive technology, that's him, right? That's his book. And he talked about how you could chip away at the bottom in order to change an industry. Like one tech swap for another would displace an incumbent, like Uber and taxis or the mini mills and steel mills. Here's the problem. We can't change an ecosystem of disparate industries that have to function together the same way you can change one industry. You cannot affect change from the bottom up. You have to affect change from the top down. So you need to have the biggest influencers in the space. You need to have the biggest buyers in the space say no more. That you have to have those people demand that change must occur. And that's happening right now. You have big serial owners, right? That's a phrase I talked about a long time ago. And my friend said, where'd that come from? Actually, Andrew, our CEO, said, where does that come from? And I said, it's like serial killers, actually. I called it like serial owners because serial killers kill a particular way every time. There's a signature to what they're looking for, consistency. Serial owners are across multiple geos and they want consistency in the way in which they're building and operating so that they have operational consistency. For them, certainty is much greater than savings. And quite frankly, it's called an estimate for a reason in our business because it never ends up as that price, right? So everything that everyone compares these to are not real. So if you look at any of the studies on the best and typical projects that are out there, they're not on time and they're not on budget. So I think the first step is I kind of laugh when you said like, well, there's so much at stake. And I'm like, but we're losing already. We're not winning. You do know that. Like we're not winning in the space. So we're not like, people don't hold us up as like an ecosystem that's like, we're a $13 trillion ecosystem that's incredibly wasteful. And I think the first step to any change is you have to have dissatisfaction, right? So if you look at the formulas that I like to think about mathematically, like everything starts with dissatisfaction. And so the unhappiest people right now are these people that have the most to build, that need operational consistency and also have the most money to spend where they can dictate and influence to the rest of the ecosystem. And they have to. I always say to them, don't hire from within our industry and think you're going to get some different thought-provoking change management. And if you are one of these cool manufacturers, just think about it logically. You know what I mean? And they're not going to help you because it's like, I use this expression all the time because we want diversity and inclusion in our space. It's like getting a bunch of over 55 white men in a room and then asking each other how to get more people of color and women in the space. Probably you should ask someone else. You know what I mean?
I think that sadly that conversation does happen. And I think then everyone just kind of looks around, and shrugs.
The problem is I don't think they do that. I actually think they all say what they think. It's like I say it like this about IC. It's like we tell people they have to act more like manufacturers and they shake their head, yes, and we know it's safer and it's more productive. And then I feel like they leave the room and they're like, what's a manufacturer? You know what I mean? It's like they don't know. So we are speaking a different language and we have to all sort of get on the same page here. And the first step is to say what we're doing now isn't working. There's lots of proof points as to why it's not. It might be a big industry. There might be lots of money in it. There might be lots of companies that make lots of money, but it's not really working. And it certainly won't work in the new normal where we're going to need all these other buildings and infrastructure. We just know that now with all the needs in healthcare there are and digital infrastructure right now that we are lacking. We know that this is changing. The environment is changing. Technology is changing. The workforce is changing. It will not continue to be anywhere near as inefficient as it is today. Later, it's going to be worse. I hate to say that, but that's true.
So do you think that there's room for, a new behemoth type of, construction company to come in like an Uber for the new construction age?
I don't think one company is big enough to make a change. I don't think, like, I deal with a lot of companies and I made a joke actually a couple months ago. I'm going to wear a t-shirt every day that says, you're just not big enough. Like one company, even at the top of the influencer chain, I came to Autodesk because I was a little company, an entrepreneur as a woman. And I was very passionate about this. And Jim Lynch, my boss, was like, listen, if you really want to change the world, you're too small. He's like, you have to come to a place that can actually affect change and be one of the influencers in the ecosystem. And he's right. And I can't do it by myself. And like even Autodesk is not big enough on their own to be able to do this. So I think, there's not one technology. That's the difference between what Clayton was talking about, what I'm talking about. There's not one technology. There's not one company. I actually think the way in which we talk about design, construction, and operate, the phases of our cycles and the names of the companies change. So you're going to see a lot more convergence in process and in company models and in industries, and that's happening now. We see convergence all the time, in lots of different parts of our world. So this convergence that's going on, and for me, it really manifests itself with companies that are fabricating, right? So I have owners that are fabricating. I now have architects that decide they're going to design and fabricate. I have general contractors that want to fabricate, and like subcontractors. Honestly, the guys that have been fabricating and ladies the most in our ecosystem for a couple decades are the MEP subcontractors, sort of in secret, right? They've been doing it in all these complex spaces behind the walls, below ground, in the central utility plants, above the ceilings. These like unsung heroes of prefabrication. All of a sudden, people are recognizing they want that value, and they're and this pressure is on the space, right? Because we have COVID and everyone, we know we have to do things differently. So what happens when you have pressure in an ecosystem is the lines all blur. So like when you say construction company to me, I don't even know what that means anymore. And quite frankly, in 5 years, 10 years, there won't be, I don't know if that terminology will exist the way it does, or when somebody says the design development phase, I don't know what that will look. I don't even think it looks anything like that. It's much more systems thinking. It's much more vertically integrated in the new normal for convergence than it ever has been before. And if you don't think about yourself in the future, I don't think you'll exist.
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, we run an innovation workshop. That's the first thing we do. And we actually do it on a personal level, which is why when we get to the end today, I ask the question that I ask, that if you don't have a vision for yourself for the future, how on earth are you going to project what the products and services of, for your company are going to be?
Right.
So, and you talk a lot about living in the future, again, for you, and this will lead us sort of to our closing question, but what would you like to see happen ideally in the industry?
I definitely think we need to have more collaboration and productization that influences the tech. So think about it. We're a $13 trillion ecosystem. And at Autodesk, we are a platform that really needs to enable and connect designers and makers. And we do that now, but it really needs to be deeper and with more functional data, and really with a real direct connection with that discrete data that we can manufacture off the data. We can eliminate and lots of the layers in our space and get rid of some waste. And, that's important. I think the future looks very different. I think we look more like a very connected, enabled platform company that we are today, but even more so. And I think a lot of those, again, the terminology that we use today it won't be the same. because there may not just be somebody who lives within the silo that they live in today. They'll probably be touching 2 or 3 of those positions at the moment.
Yeah, and you talk about convergence a lot. I look at the sort of the convergence of the technologies, like how do we, blend, AR, VR, blockchain, AI with, cloud, edge services, the wearables that are coming out. And so how much do you think that convergence of technology, particularly thinking specifically around smart cities, will then start to drive smart buildings, or do you see it the other way around?
Yeah. It's funny. I used to have a slide like 10 years ago, and I was like, I used to have a Walkman, and then they talked me into like an iPod, and then the iPod became my iPad, and the iPad became my Mac, and then the Mac now became my Apple CarPlay. And I'm like, the building is not even the largest chassis anymore for the platform. It's the city, right? So if you think about places on this planet where they're pumping in capacity right now, like the continent of Africa, there's very little legacy infrastructure there. And so the smart city, which you can't build the same old way, most people forget that part. When we think about like buildings that are built differently with IoT sensors and understanding the data that can actually speak to us and heal themselves, that's really what the platform at Autodesk would like to really enable. And we do, and really in what we see in the future. And when I say platform, I don't mean just our product portfolio connected. I mean our product portfolio with other people's software that can interact with each other and actually connect to each other, because the chassis is really the city, right? It becomes the city then. I think of all these companies now that look, at the end of the day, does and I don't want to call it any one particular company, but do they want to fight it out on a retail level with me to buy my fridge separately, my microwave, my washer dryer, or do they want me to move into an enabled apartment building in this city that's an enabled city by all their tech, and I'm in the tech, right? I live in the tech. So I think if we are not recognizing that that's happening, and there's a global struggle for that digitization of my platform and my my space in the platform, we by the way, and all we do sometimes in construction is rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic when we think about our 2.5-3%. How do we get 4? It's like, trust me, the platform money is much, we're talking about pennies now instead of like millions of billions and trillions and stuff like. So I think if you don't recognize that change, what's happening, and I definitely know that Autodesk does, which is why I came here, that we need to play a role to make this a better city for the end users, for the people that live there, for the people that build those, for the people that design those. That's critical, because we need so much of that infrastructure on this planet that if we don't do that in a smart way, what a waste. So much waste is gonna be produced by that.
Yeah, that's such a great point that you bring up Africa, because in on the one hand, the challenge is that there's no infrastructure. The other hand, the opportunity is that there is no infrastructure, right? It's a blank canvas, because we have to retrofit all of these cities. We talk about the cloud and the network, but those are all, there's hardware involved, and every lamppost and all those boxes you see on street
fiber
corners.
underground,
Right,
all the fiber underground that doesn't exist in Africa that exists here.
So we have an opportunity maybe to rewrite that.
It's worse than that. There's the physicality of the infrastructure, but what really holds people back are the territory of that infrastructure, the politicizing of that infrastructure. That's the problem, right? So it's like, I always say it's not hard to prefabricate pipe racks. It's hard to find leadership, a culture, and a process that enables you to fabricate pipe rack. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's very little about of the physicality. It's mostly about culture and strategy, and the tools and the tech and things like that, and the way in which we collaborate as people, and the fact that, listen, when I came to Autodesk, and I gotta say, this is not a shameless plug. This is really about my life. I thought, wow, I'm really coming to the right place where people care about this, and they speak this language that I love, that I'm so passionate about, that I was willing to give up my own business for. But then I was like, wow, let's see what happens now. And I just remember Andrew and Jim saying to me and everybody there, just go out and help people. Go and help our customers, go and help our employees. I don't take credit. Just Amy, just get out there and help people on their prefabricated hospital, whatever they need, just go help. And I watched behind the scenes people that I didn't know. I knew they were talking the talk, because that's why I came. It's going to be more about walking the walk in the future, right? It's like, you can't just use these marketing words that you're saying something, it has to be realized. You have to actually take action. It's the same thing with my friend about tech and their behavior. You can't actually change something unless you change your own behavior first, right? In the way in which we interact on this planet.
Well, I would say that you made the right move because you really are out there helping people. I've watched your videos. You are an absolute force. And if anyone can move the needle and enact some change, it's you, Amy Marks. And let's talk a little bit about your red stiletto back there.
Oh, my red, everybody loves my red shoe. So I always say my red shoe is going to change the world. And, it's like the way we do things right now in our ecosystem, it's as if I walk down to my shoemaker barefoot and I'm like, I need shoes. And I say, I need shoes. And he goes, put your foot down on paper, Amy. And he draws a line around my toes. And I go, okay, well, when should I come back? And how much will it be? He's like, I don't know, maybe like 2-3 weeks. And like, it depends how much leather I use. And then I go, okay, I'll come back. And maybe I come back, it's ready. And I go, all right, what did it cost? And he's like, well, it's not ready. Come back in 3 days. I go, okay, no problem. So I come back and then it's my shoe, right? But like, that's not how I bought this. This is an 8.5. I bought this on an enabled connected platform where I had a direct connection to the manufacturer of this shoe, where I could put in the parameters of what I want, think generative design. And I could say, I want a red leather shoe patent, by the way, and I want it to be 4-inch heels and I want it to be comfortable. It needs to come from a 5-star rated manufacturer. By the way, I want to pay less than this and it needs to come within 2 days. And like Santa, boom, here comes my shoe. And the only reason why this is an 8.5, and it could be productized or we could buy it with certainty, is because there was a connected enabled platform like that. And by the way, not only did it say you can have that, it said you should buy this shoe and these pants, these socks, this blouse, and this necklace. That'll make the perfect outfit. And that frees me up, right? Think if you're an architect, it freed me up as a consumer to go do other things with my time that were more productive. So I always say my red shoe is going to change the world, hopefully.
Well, that is a perfect analogy. And it brings me to my last question, which I ask everyone. So if you could project yourself into the future, 2030, 2040, or beyond, and you could create the perfect gadget for you, for your life, what would it be and what would it do?
It's funny. I'm a mom first before everything I do. So I actually don't, when you say for me, I almost don't know what that means in my, like what do I do for anything for myself? So I actually went and, I've talked to my daughter about this and I've said to her, like, well, what could you, if you could have anything, what would it be? And she said, I would create something in farming and agriculture that would feed the people of our planet. And then I said, that's great, Mackenzie. And she said, just make sure you credit me and get it right. So hopefully I did for her. But I think I want to, like, I'd love to be able to have people think about not just what they would want in the future, but what their kids and their grandkids and other people's kids and grandkids might want in the future, what they would want in the future. That's more important to me. I mean, me personally, I would love like maybe an authenticity meter filter, that microaggression filter that runs around me all the time, that people know that I actually really care. And I always say I'm like a bunny in a monster costume. If they could just know that without me having to look like I'm so tough and so intense, it would be great if they could have that when I walk in the room, if that was possible for me. But it would free me up to be more authentic all the time, not have to explain things.
See, there you go. But see, I think of it as passion. I think, it's like you love what you do and it shows. It's been so great chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining us on Future Construct.
Thank you.